Hello. Do you remember every time we talk about the fetters, we talk about the first fetter, which is identification with thought, the second fetter, identification with feeling and emotions, the third fetter, which is about all the habits, all the things we do to avoid getting in contact with the identification and getting in contact with the underlying feeling and emotions and the underlying starting point. And when we talk about it like that, because we talk about the first, second, and third, and so on, all the way up to the 10th, it kind of indicates that there's a linearity to the fetters. And even though we over and over and over say that there is no linearity, it's not how awakening works. It's not how the unhooking of identification works. Then still it has that undertone of it because we talk about the first, the second, the third. So we talked about how we could do that, how we could help you guys in looking into the identification that is happening at any given moment and not be tied into that you have to work with the fetter that you are at. So if you have reached the third fetter, you cannot talk about the fourth fetter or the fifth fetter. You need to wait until the third has fallen and then move on. And it's just not the way that we experience that awakening is happening. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because we talked about how we could make it easier and more useful. Both of us want you guys to live it, not only on the cushion, not only in your meditation, and not only when you're practicing, but living with the fetters all the time, becoming aware of where identification is happening all the time, becoming aware of where is the difference between thought and sensory experiences all the time. And that's why we came up with the wheel.
Yeah.
And we call it the wheel of identification, and this is how it looks. So as you can see, all the fetters are there. It is on purpose that we haven't put the first fetter, the identification curriculum, on top. And it's also on purpose that we haven't made it either clockwise or counterclockwise. Because we want you to become aware of this is about identification. And there are lots of different ways of identifying. You will also see that they are not in sequence. If you find the first fetter, the identification curriculum, the one about identifying with thought, you will see that it's not in sequence. It's not the second, the third, the fourth after that in any way, and that is on purpose. And we're going to talk about why that is. So let's talk about the wheel. What do you want to say?
Well, yeah, I think basically this came about because we've had so many people coming out to us saying that, I think I'm at Fetter 5, but they'll start going into what's been going on in their lives, and we'll find that there's some very deep Fetter 1 selfing issues that are still happening. And there's such a prejudice about going back and working with that in the moment, because it feels like we are sending people back to the first grade and they're being demoted, or somehow it's like that, well, I'm not there yet, or whatever it is. And it just leads into this extra layer of selfing that is creating so much turmoil, and it keeps people from actually doing the inquiry that would be helping them. And so I was thinking it would be much better if we just had a wheel as opposed to this ladder approach that we always talk about, because it just doesn't seem to be the experience of anybody that we talk to, that it's just this very clear, concise check, 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 check all the way down the line. People are always going back and forth. There are times where, yes, it's easier to work with 4 and 5 if you don't have all of the selfing and all the identification of thought and all of that stuff to begin with. But it doesn't mean that you're not going to be going and working with that same stuff over and over again. And it might be easier to see through some aspects of like the 6th fetter and stuff after 4 and 5 are gone. But again, it's people who are still in the first fetter come and they have had experiences where they've seen, at least had glimpses through fetter 6, 7, sometimes even 8, but then they're still caught up believing their thoughts every day.
Yeah.
So there's so much of this back and forth constant. People see it as like
A linear process.
well, they see it as a linear process, but the problem with that is that they also feel like they are they're regressing on days
Yes.
when they're having these other issues. It's like, oh, well, I'm going back, and now I thought I was there, but I guess I'm not. And then they get in these ironically very first fetter head trips about
Yeah,
it.
and it's also why I have tried to say in the curriculum that you're not going back to the first, you're not going back to the second, you're going deeper in the first, and you're going deeper with the second. Because in the first fetter, when you see through identification and you see through self, and you realize that you have all the sensory experiences, and then you have thought on top of that. And that bracket where the thought is, it's very easy to realize that, oh my goodness, all this is thought. But when you then move on, and when you then stand and catch yourself in an argument with Janice in the office, let's say, then you're very, very clear about this is the fifth fetter. But how do I go about this? How do I work with this? Oh, I can't work with that yet because I haven't done the second fetter yet. So I'm not allowed to work with the fifth fetter, which is just confusing, and it's an unnecessary stick in the wheel.
Yeah.
And then I also want to say when we're about this, because for you experienced the 10th fetter falling before the fifth fetter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Had completely fallen. Would you talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, it was actually more. Again, this process is so non-linear that it's hard to even say for sure, when the first fetter was completely gone in my case. It was like there were so many years of it falling away or being seen through in bits. And when I went to LU, I didn't think I had seen through, but in some ways it's like I had, and in some ways I think it was more the doubt element that still had been there. And it was actually while in the later months of working through with LU that I had this, I was talking to Stacy on video, my guide, and there had been a constant issue with in the inquiry, because I had this thing where I just didn't believe that I could know anything. And it was the sticking point where I still felt like I had to take on some sort of belief.
Yeah.
And we were having this video chat, and it occurred to me that, the only thing that I know for sure is that I can't know anything. And there was such a relief in saying that and voicing it out loud. And then it was like, I don't know if it was days or a week later when I had stumbled on this Robert Saltzman video, and he basically said a version of that there are things that nobody knows and nobody can ever know. And it was just like this, yes, and like the weight just fell off, and this, and I had always been rather agnostic and had that kind of mentality before, but it was like something just really like, yes, and I would just let go. And that was well before I, was working with 4 and 5, or even before I had officially cleared 1. And it was like there was such a dropping of that, and then that has just continued to solidify and, become more and more understood as time has gone on.
But exactly, and it's also my experience that a lot of people they are trying to work with the fetters in a linear model, and then they come to a group, or they come to a one-to-one, or they're being guided, and it just doesn't fit. Yeah. It doesn't fit, and they are stuck in a fetter, even though they start to see, reality is not like the way that I view it in the 6th fetter, or about wisdom, you cannot know anything in the 10th fetter. Yeah. Have no issue for shopping, or have really looked through all kinds of addictions in the 4th fetter. So, but they can't really move on because they're not allowed to, because they haven't passed that fetter. And what we are posing instead, it is that in your everyday life, that you become aware of, where am I right now?
Yeah.
Where am I right now? What tool is useful for me right now? Because you will find out that at some point during the day, it's very much fourth fetter wanting things. And the moment after, you can be in doubt about a decision that you're making, and it's not really about so much about doubt, it's more about the selfing. You're concerned about how you view yourself in the situation that you're in. And it's like that during the day. It's like changing all the time because it's how we are as humans.
Yeah.
And there's not one mold that fits everyone.
No.
There's not one way to do it that fits everyone. So it's another reason why I would like to have the wheel and work with it, because all 10 fetters is about identification. So it's more about realizing where are you stuck right now, and work with the lesson in the fetter that is relevant for you right now. Use inquiries that are relevant for you right now. Use tools that are relevant for you right now, instead of adhering to a specific structure in a context or construct that doesn't exist anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Like I feel like you should picture this wheel with a little spinner on it, like it's in a board game. And so just throughout the day, when you realize whatever is happening, you just recognize, oh, my spinner is on 1 right now. Oh, I got really angry at that cashier. My spinner is on 5. And then, like you just said, work with the tools for that fetter that are there. And also the insight that's there. If you're having some moment of clarity, some moment of recognizing impermanence or ignorance, like the wisdom of ignorance, or having had like a moment of perspective shift or something, just recognize, oh, the spinner is on fetter 9, 10, 6, wherever it seems to be that wisdom is there. And don't just play it off that, well, it couldn't be anything because I'm only on fetter 5 right now, I can't have that. Just recognize it for what it is and embrace that. Embrace the wisdom and insight that came in that moment.
And sorry, did I interrupt?
I was going to say though, just like a little caveat too, because I think like with anything that we put out, it runs the inherent risk of being another tool for identification.
Yeah.
And so again, even if you recognize that the little spinner arrow is pointing to one of the 10, don't get hung up on it being you who is in that point and that on that place. Like it's still.
That's funny. It was very, very similar to what I
wanted
to say. Yeah, It was about that. That it's also, if you have worked through all the fetters. Right now, when this recording has been made, we're working on the 5th fetter. And if you are at the 5th fetter, then you have also realized that sometimes you are acting as if the 1st fetter has not fallen, or sometimes you act as if a feeling or emotion that is coming up is true, and you really do believe that this is what I feel, and instead of thinking, oh my god, it can't be the 1st fetter, it can't be the 2nd fetter, then in that there's a lot of identifying, and there's a lot of hooks into something not being the way that it is, and it makes it more complicated to kind of pull yourself up on the 5th floor and just view the situation without any kind of judgment to what is happening, but just acknowledging, how is it in the body right now? What do you feel right now? What thoughts are going through your head? Is there any connection between the two? And just use the tools that you have in that moment where you recognize where on the wheel the spinner is at that point. So I also see that this is not a new concept or a new belief that we are trying to give you. On the contrary, we are trying to dissolve even more of how the fetters was. Well,
I was gonna say, and to that end too, I think when we have the linear model that looks kind of like a ladder where you're going up from 1 to 10, it really gives you the impression that not only are they linear, but they're also very discrete steps, and that they're, even though we say all the time that the fetters aren't real, that there is this feeling that, well, okay, I can still check off box after box after box, so there must be some reality to that. And I think the nice thing about having it in a circle also, even though you can see lines between all the little wedges, it's more the outside, the sense that they're all connected, and it's not a bunch of really discrete steps that it's actually more of just this unified flowing back and forth of one aspect and another aspect kind of commingling, which I think you get at better in a circle than in some sort of like a ruler or a ladder.
Mm. And then when you look at the wheel, you will also see that, like I said, that it's not that the first feather is neighbor to the second feather, that is neighbor to the third feather, and so on. It's for you to use wherever you are in the wheel at the moment. But you can see that what the pair is, because all of the feathers are paired. So you can see that the first feather is on the other side, opposites of its pair, and so it is all the way through. And it's to give you a bit of a help in realizing where you are in the lower feather and the higher feather, because it is more or less the same we're working with in the lower and the higher. It's just on a more subtle plane. And sometimes it helps to, if you're really, really stuck in the third feather about rules and rituals and you're doing things with a purpose, then and you're completely stuck there, you cannot see your way through that, then sometimes it helps to go to the pair that is the ninth feather, that is about flow, and going, okay, how can I get more flow in my life right now? How can I help myself right now by releasing all the assumptions of things being conditioned by one another, and I am an agent and I can do something? How can I tap into that flow and feeling like that?
Yeah. Such a good, it's such a good point, and I think it's such a helpful reminder that you get by having it in that format that you don't get in the stepwise format. It's very hard to see it, when things are laid out sequentially like that. It's very hard to see the connections and how they overlap. And I mean, you've been saying forever that it's more that hermeneutical cycle where you're going back and forth and deeper and deeper.
Yeah. On a practical point, the different colors that you see that we have in the wheel, it's the same colors as is used in the curriculum on the YouTube channel. So it's easier to see when you go to the channel, you can recognize which color you are at and which color you need to see. And then the last thing I want to say, that just like you have the wheel of identification, you also have the wheel of antidotes. And the antidotes is when you are working with a feather, for example, with the fourth and the fifth feather, which is about all the things, the craving, all the things you want and all the things you don't want. The antidote to that is contentment. And you use the wheel of antidotes to look at what is the mantra that I need to have, what is it that I need to keep in mind when I'm working with this feather.
Yeah, it's so useful to have a practical tool for each time that we recognize that our spinner is on a specific spot, to not just be lost in the, oh, I guess I'm here and I don't know what to do about it, but it's nice to have practical ways to integrate it into life, to work with it, to see where you're stuck and how to get out of it.
Yeah, and also because like we keep emphasizing that this is not the feather work the way that we work with it. It's not something that you only do on the cushion, or you only do every Tuesday or every other Tuesday when we have the inquiry. And it's not something that you only do once in a while. We want you to live it. We want you to really, it's very, very easy to be awakened and enlightened when you're sitting in a cave. It's a completely different business when you're juggling a family of 4. And you have Janice as a co-worker and the traffic jam and election soon and all that. So we are more interested in the exciting part of the feathers, that is to live it, to integrate it, to make it into a practical application in your life, so you are actually living it. That was the idea with making the wheel.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add?
I think not much. Just I think I would say again,
emphasize that it's not a new concept. Yes. It's not something which you take on now as a model of doing. Keep it light, really, really keep it light. Yeah. It's supposed to dissolve the whole hierarchical. Thank you. Way of seeing the feathers, and instead using wherever you're at as an indication to what needs your attention and your awareness. And as always, it is about identification. All 10 fetters is about identification. And in, like we said also in a million times, it's like there are like two different worlds. There's the sensory experience that you experience with your senses, what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you taste, and what you feel. That is reality, and that's where you're at. And then you have all the thoughts on top, and that creates the pseudo reality where we have all the suffering. So it's just to realize where you're at and help you navigate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a tool. It's not something to buy into or to get hung up on or to create a whole new philosophy around. It's just I feel like the wheel is itself an antidote to just this kind of unskillful, unhealthy thinking that people get into when they're working with it.
Yeah, because it is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's really, really heartbreaking when you've been following someone and they are doing really, really well, and then they feel that they get stuck in the fifth fetter, for example. It's normally what has happened. That people, they get stuck in the fifth fetter, and then they give up because it's just too much, and they can't see themselves go back to the first. And no matter how much we say you're not going back, you're going deeper, you're going deeper, you're going deeper. It's because it's built the way that it is. It's just, it gives a very unhealthy relationship with the entire process.
It really does.
And we hope that the wheel is gonna soften that more. So you see that you can't be stuck anywhere ever. You can't be stuck anywhere ever. Yeah. It's a constant flow that is happening, and you're not going back. You're just in a different part of identification. There's a different part that needs your love and your compassion and your kindness.
Yeah.
Is that it?
I think so.
I think
that covers it.
Yeah. If you have any questions, come to the Q&A that we have every other Friday, or come to the inquiry that we have every other Tuesday. It would be great to hear how you're getting on with the wheel of identification. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.